Now, Dr. Miguna is a visionary and committed revolutionary Pan-Africanist who believes in and is committed to a more equal, accountable, and transparent governance. He obtained a Bachelor of Arts degree with a distinction in political science and philosophy from the University of Toronto in June 1990. A Juris Doctor, JD, from Osgoode Hall Law University of York in June, Law School of University of York, or York University, in June 1993, and a Master of Laws LLM degree with a distinction from the same university in June 2001. He was admitted to the Ontario Bar as a barrister and solicitor in February 1995, and as an advocate in Kenya in 2008. Between 1989 and 1994, he was the coordinator of the Committee for Democracy in Kenya, CDK, an exile-based pro-democracy lobby group that successfully campaigned for the repeal of Section 2A of the old Constitution, and that had made Kenya a one state. I remember I've told you when we were in China, they could not breathe, because when they left, that particular Section 2A had not been changed. We had single party. Dr. Miguna has served as a senior advisor and chief strategist for the Orange Democratic Party, ODM, and its party leader, and also a senior advisor on coalition, constitutional and legal affairs to the Prime Minister of the Republic of Kenya. Dr. Miguna has been a commentator on cultural and socio-political affairs and has published 6 books and thousands of articles in journals and newspapers both in Kenya and abroad. His latest books are Praying Back the Mask, most of us would remember it, A Quest for Justice in Kenya, that was in 2012, and Kidneys for the King, Deforming the Status Quo in Kenya, that is 2013. Today I learned that he has published another book called Treason. He will tell us more about that. Today, the Kenya Methodist University Fraternity and Friends are honored to host and to hear from Dr. Miguna and his plan for the Kenyan, especially the youth. A leader who has always been an openly vocal critic on the leadership and governance of our country. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we can start and then clap and welcome our chief guest, Dr. Miguna. General, welcome.
Thank you very much. Is it clear? I thank everybody very much, starting with the distinguished professor and VC, the DVC, and all the university administration and student fraternity. Good afternoon. God is good? All the time? That's good. You see, I can also say that. We can all sit down. Because today we are talking about justice and democracy, and because the student leader, the president, Abdi, has instigated me, I am going to announce that all KEMU students and members who were exiled to Mexico will be unilaterally and conditionally be readmitted to the community of civilized Twitter. Once they give their Twitter handles to Abdi, they will all come from Mexico. So I hope that you can enjoy the new democratic environment in my Twitter handle. Thank you very much. I'm going to discuss this topic in a roundabout manner. I know that I was also asked a question whether is it good to seek justice on the street? That was a question that was posed al cathedra. But the main question is, what is justice? What is democracy? How do students in the 21st century, the youth, foster it? In a manner of speaking, that's the topic. Good is not an attribute that is easy to discern, to describe, to articulate. Because good is a value. It's neither positive or negative. Because what is good for John may not be good for Mary. So good is not something you can scientifically evaluate. There are no material ingredients of the word good or bad. They're just value statements. So if you took good to a lab, you would not find the DNA of good. You would find a description of what we ascribe as good. So I will change the question from, is it good to seek justice on the street, to what are the most appropriate mechanisms of seeking justice? Whether it is on the street, whether it is on the boardroom, whether it is in courts, whether it is in parliament, whether it is on demonstrations, whether it is at any forum. What are the most appropriate mechanisms? But before we get there, what is justice? Justice is almost close to the value good, except that unlike good, we do have attributes of what justice looks like. We can describe its limbs, we can describe its legs, or its hands, ears, head, and the anatomy. So let's start with what we know as justice generally from cartoons and anything else. There is a pole with two hands, one slightly down, the other one up. The symbol of justice. It's never like this. Why? Because there is no even justice anywhere in the world throughout history. There is no society from the beginning to now, and I don't think there will be, where everything is even. Where everybody has the same height, where everybody has the same color, where everybody has the same tonal voice, where everybody has the same intellect, where everybody occupies the same position in society. Society is always rugged. It's not even, like the topography of the world. Therefore, it means that what may be just to Miguna may sometimes not be just to somebody else. But we can have a general sense of what justice is to everybody else. And what is it? So I'll give you a few examples. I'll describe justice by giving a few examples, and describe democracy by giving a few examples, and then I will tell you what I think or believe the role of students or youth should be in making sure that we get more of them. So I'll give you the example of two brothers in Meru here, I think just 2 years ago, that were abducted by policemen, tortured, and murdered. You all know them. They are called the Meru brothers. I hope you know all them, right? You know their name? You don't. But I hope you know who I am talking about. Oh, it was Embu. So I'm sorry I confused Embu with Meru. But I think the example is very live. Here are two young men who are going about their business, selling or hawking things so that they could make a living. They were caught by rogue policemen. I understand they were rogue because they were not sent to arrest them. They then detained them, tortured them, and killed them. 2 years on, I don't believe they have been convicted and sentenced. So if you ask the question, what would justice look like to these two brothers and their families and their loved ones and their friends and their acquaintances? There are those in this group here, in this gathering, who will say that the ones who killed them should be hanged. There are those who will say that because they killed, they took away life. So an eye for an eye. There are those who will say that the police officers who did this should also be tortured before they are killed. That's worse than an eye for an eye. And then there are those who will say that upon conviction, a court of law will determine the punishment that they should face. That is the rule of law. So number one, an eye for an eye cannot be justice because it is vengeance. The word vengeance is has a negative connotation because it has anger, it has cruelty, it has tit for tat. And that cannot be just because it would be punishing someone in a manner that is cruel. I don't know if I'm holding it too close. It is not just because it is cruel. Justice to these police officers, the way we understand it, the way I understand it, is for the police to be arrested promptly. They were not arrested promptly. It is for investigations to be done impartially. It is investigations to be done in a manner that is transparent, that citizens can monitor. It is for the judiciary to preside over the hearing credibly, impartially, and for the law and the evidence to be used to find whether these people are guilty or not, and if they are, to punish them to the full extent of the law within the Constitution. We know, for example, that the Kenya Constitution 2010 does not allow for capital punishment. I mean, it's still going on. We have magistrates and judges who are still sentencing people to death. It is actually unconstitutional. So death sentence is not prescribed in the Constitution. So if you're going to have some, then clearly you'd be doing something unconstitutional, and that cannot be just. So justice, first of all, must be fair, must be impartial, must comply with the law and the Constitution governing a people. So that's the way I would describe justice. Vigilantism, what they do on the street when they catch somebody who has stolen a phone. What do they call that? Mob justice. It's not justice. Even though they say justice, after they say mob. So how do the youth in Kenya, for instance, how would they foster justice? in the 21st century? How would you, as a KEMU student, foster justice in the environment in which we live? Number one, you must always seek truth under any circumstances. So the first ingredient for justice is truth, whatever it is. Even though we disagree on what that truth may be, to the full extent, as much as possible within your powers, always seek truth. How do you seek truth? Inquiry, asking questions, investigating, interrogating, seeking it, looking for it, not being satisfied with answers that are obvious, that are vague, that are general, that are given out of intentions to mislead or distort. So justice can only be obtained through truth. Truth can only be obtained through what I have just said. How do you do that as a student? Students have inquisitive minds. As a trait, young people always ask the question, why? So you start with why. Then you go to how. Then you go to who. Then you go to for what reason. These are the essential ingredients and questions when you are pursuing justice through truth. You've heard something called truth, justice, and reconciliation. It was a big thing in South Africa after the end of apartheid. It was a big thing a few years ago after the post-election violence of 2007-2008. We had Justice Kriegler come from South Africa to preside over an inquiry as to what happened in 2007 election. Then we had Ambassador Kiplagat, Bethwel Kiplagat, the late, be the chairman of Truth, Justice, and Reconciliation. The word truth appears before justice because you cannot get truth. No, you cannot get justice without truth. And the word reconciliation appears after justice, deliberately. Because without justice, you cannot be reconciled. I have had a lot of talk in this country where people talk about peace. They talk about reconciliation. They talk about harmony. But they never talk about truth and justice. So for instance, when I gave you the example of the two brothers, the question we have to ask, do most Kenyans know the truth of what happened? If you don't, then no matter the outcome of the judicial proceeding, it cannot be just. Because you must establish the truth first. So when you're talking about electoral justice, because I know that your Baba is having a rally in Nairobi today, right? And he's talking about justice, electoral justice. But the question you have to ask, what is the truth about those elections? How do we determine that truth? Who determines that truth? What is the process of determining that truth? Right? So in elections, for example, you start with the bodies that are mandated for running elections. So that's where you start, because they have the ability, the capacity, the legal authority, and the instruments of running elections and determining winners and losers. Then you go to the figures, the data, and you analyze the data to find out whether, in fact, what is announced corresponds to how people voted, right? Once you determine that, then you go to the ones who are declared winners. Do they correspond to the data? And if it does, then we have an electoral justice issue resolved. because it means the people who are declared winners were actually voted for by the majority of the people, isn't it? But there are those in this world who will never accept that. They will run for elections or anything else and insist that if they don't win, then nobody else has won. And I'm not here talking about him. I'm talking generally. In the United States, you know, Trump did the same, right? He said the 2021 elections were rigged, didn't he? And he refused to accept the results. And he organized riots in Washington. And you know there has been an inquiry and there will be investigations and prosecutions happening in the United States. The same thing happened in Brazil. Bolsonaro refused to accept that Lula defeated him. So this is not an unusual or extraordinary experience we are having in Kenya. Okay? So how do students ensure that there is justice, say, for example, in the electoral process? By registering as voters, by becoming active in the political process, by agitating for change, by making sure that only winners are declared as victors. In my time, we used to do this as a duty. We did it every day in my time. I know many decades later, many of you are not as politically active as we were then. What I will tell you throughout the world is that the youth is the engine of change all over the world. Because you are young, you have the most active brain and body, you are stronger than the average citizen because you are young, you have advantage of age because you have more years to live, you have a stake in what the country becomes in a few years because you are yet to marry, to have children, to have a future, to have the basic necessities of life. So it is in your best interest to take part in the political process. That's the only way to secure it. And if you do that, you will ensure that justice pertains in electoral processes, in governance, in all spheres of life. So what is democracy? I know that many of you here do political science, sociology, and other things that describe democracy. I will be very simple. I will say what they say all over, that it is the rule by the people, for the people, with the people. So how do you ensure that you are in governance, that you are ruling yourself, that you are determining who actually governs you, and that you are part of that governance whether you occupy public office or not? Just like here, you have the Vice Chancellor, you have the DVCs, you have the teachers, the professors, the administrators. How do you make sure that you participate in the management of affairs at KEMU by being a student? Not even a student leader, by actively participating in the affairs that relate to your status as a student at KEMU, by raising reasonable questions about your affairs, whatever they are. I understand one of the affairs is fashion or dress code, and that it has been a very controversial issue, right? I know that there is a dress code. That is why everyone is pleasantly dressed today. I'm not seeing tumbo cuts and other things. So that's a good thing, right? Because we have to decide what is it that brought you here. I mean, you came to university and you're paying tuition. For what? What is the reason? What's the end game? The end game is to get a certificate or a diploma or a degree, correct? And then after that, you do what with it? You seek employment, right? There is no degree of tumbocracy. They have not yet introduced it. Nor is there a degree of dancing. Even though there are visual arts, and I appreciate the artistry and the dance that we saw, but it's for entertainment. Maybe you can get a degree in entertainment, which will include dancing, but not purely dance only. Dancing and choreography is a big thing internationally, but only after you have done certain things. So I think the bottom line is that to democratize KEMU and to democratize Kenya, you first of all have to operate within certain rules, which we all agree are universal rules. That number one, you have to recognize that this is an institution with rules, right? Things that can and cannot be done. And those that can be done within what parameters? Always 4 walls. You don't go outside it. Even I, Miguna, they call me general, only operate within parameters. If you recall, they kicked me out of the country. For 5 years. Where did I go? I went to court. I did not go and get a gun so that I could form an army so that I can have a confrontation with them. I went to court, isn't it? So that's a parameter. And I won repeatedly because they were wrong and I was right. And when you are wrong, you will always lose. When you are right, you will always win. I played within the rules, isn't it? I had a lawyer. I petitioned. I produced evidence. I submitted in court. I won 36 times against a state, against a president, against a commander-in-chief of all the military forces, against a person that people say is above the law, a person who can call a judge and the judge answers standing up. But when the judge goes to the chamber, the judge tells him, Your Excellency, you are wrong on this one. 36 times. So I'm saying this can be done and should be done within the walls of the 4 pillars. Number 2, I got court orders, right? They ignored them. Have they not now been obeyed? They have now been obeyed. I got my passport back. I was allowed back. I'm here. Nobody's harassing me, right? So you don't have to do bad things that they are doing because they are doing them. And when you saw how they were portraying me in the media, you'd think Miguna has horns or maybe explosives from his head, right? That's the way they described me. But you're not seeing those horns today, do you? Because of fear. Democracy cannot foment itself through fear. It has to be perpetuated through a peaceful and a reliable, predictable environment, which we can all create. Democracy cannot be fostered through force, the thorax. I have a big gun, therefore I am right. I have many goons, therefore I am right. I have more money, therefore I am right. That's not democracy. Whether poor or rich has nothing to do with whether you are right or wrong. Right or wrong depends on the evidence, the material conditions of the situation. That is what determines right or wrong. Power does not make right. They say might does not make right. Therefore, might has no role in democracy. If in this institution, The administration enforced rules and policy merely because they occupy positions of power. I think the students will overthrow them. I mean, the Vice Chancellor is very humble, spoke very well, danced, did a jig, and has entertained us, has given us a lecture humbly, not by force. He did not issue fiats or directives. If you do that, you're a military tyrant, isn't it? We know before the 2022 elections that there were people running around this country, some of them supported by Abdi, that told us the train has left. If you don't get in now, you cannot get in. The door has been closed. You see, eventually you just lose. Because directives and fiats ultimately cannot succeed. No train left. Democracy is not a train. You don't close the door as a person for everybody else, and you tell them they can either take it or leave it. That's not the way to go. So what do you do as students to ensure that the country, Kenya, is governed through the rule of law, through the dictates of constitutionalism, and good governance? Good governance to mean that if you elect leaders today, you monitor their performance, and if they don't perform well, you can either recall them, you can impeach them, or you can kick them out in the next election. So, first of all, you must know what your role is. Secondly, you must know what these leaders are supposed to do for you, the services they are supposed to deliver. You must know the resources that they have and they use on your behalf. So that if they fail to do what they are supposed to do, you call them to account. There are many mechanisms of calling them to account. This could include street protests. So I'm coming back to the question I was asked. Can justice be sought on the street? Yes, it can. And it normally is sought on the streets. In fact, if everything else fails, the street is the only place to seek justice. If everything else fails, that is the only way it was done when we were reintroducing multi-party democracy in this country. We forced Moi to repeal Section 2A by demonstrations. It was not done in boardrooms, and it was not done peacefully, but because everything else had failed. You heard about the Arab Spring that brought down governments in the Middle East and North Africa. It was on the street. You've heard about the Orange Revolution in Ukraine and other countries. How was it done? It was done on the street. So yes, you can seek justice on the street if and when everything else fails. If courts do not give you justice because judges are compromised, or judges are threatened, or judges are bribed, then you can't go to court. There is no reason to go to court. If you can't seek justice legislatively because your members of parliament are picked or handpicked by party leaders and imposed, and then they go to parliament and all they do is take their benefits and salary and do not care about you, then you have to go to the street. But as I said, it is the ultimate, final resort when everything else has failed. Now, popular protests are entrenched in the Constitution of Kenya 2010. Everybody is allowed to protest peacefully, without weapons. So as long as you do it peacefully, without weapons, it is allowed. All right? Then you can go to court, as I said. That's another mechanism And you can also write. You can also do petitions. You can also just agitate. You've seen these people that just stand in Uhuru Park or wherever it is, Jivanji Gardens, with a megaphone, and they are talking. That's part of agitation. It's legitimate. It's allowed. Right? So I will end by saying that students are the motors of change in the world throughout history. Lenin in Russia in 1915, 1917 was a student leader before he led the Russian Revolution. Castro, 1956 Cuba, was a student leader before he led the Cuban Revolution. In Africa, there have been many, many students, especially in South Africa, that rose to national prominence and leadership because of their role as student leaders. Here in Kenya, most of your leaders have been student leaders before. I think the most prominent right now as we speak probably is James Orengo, because he was a student leader in 1970s against Kenyatta. And you've had Rumba Kenothia, Okio, Kombaka. There are many leaders that have risen in this country through the student movement. You don't have to be a politician to be a leader. In fact, in Kenya, most politicians are not leaders. Because leadership is not about occupying public office. Leadership is about vision. Leadership is about the ability to guide, to advise, to be able to represent the aspirations of the people towards a higher goal. Meaning that in Kenya today, if you ask the question, what is it that most Kenyans aspire for? What is it? It's not money. I know many of you will say money. Money is not a value. Money is not a goal. Money is not an aspiration. Money is an instrument. In fact, a fiction, an economic fiction. Money is not real. So it's not money. Most people want to live in a fair, equal, equitable, happy society. Peaceful, happy society. This is what everybody is seeking. Whether it is marriage, you are seeking happiness. You are seeking peace. You are seeking fulfillment. You've not heard somebody say, I'm married because I want to be rich. The most frustrating relationships are among the rich. They are not happy. The rich are not happy. Most of them are very unhappy. Most of them. All right? And they are not fulfilled. Ask the question why these trillionaires are still stealing. Somebody is a billionaire and they are still stealing. What is it they are looking for? It's not money, it's not wealth, it's not happiness. They don't even know. They don't know what they're seeking. So, we are seeking peace, tranquility, joy, and just fairness. That's what we are seeking. So the question you have to ask yourself, what is it you're going to do to help foster this in our society? To transform Kenya so that not everybody is just looking for money without working. Productivity is good. It is what brings prosperity. It is actually what you should be seeking. But unfortunately in Kenya, work is supposed to be bad because people who work are not rich. The ones who are stealing are richer. The ones who are doing deals are richer. The ones who failed their exams are doing better than the ones who passed. Like last week, they released the results, KCSE, right? You see the A's. I am not going to comment on whether or not the exams were leaked or not. But no matter what it was, we know, no matter what, that there are students who genuinely got A's. And you expect these genuine A's to go to good faculties at the universities, graduate and get good jobs, right? But is that the reality in Kenya? Most hardworking students, most brilliant students, most promising students, bright scholars, are unemployed. Many of them die very painful deaths. This is what we want to change. The democracy I'm describing, the ones I am saying you should foster in the 21st century, should ensure that these students get employed, get paid based on merit and ability. I'm not saying that everybody must get A. And I'm not saying or arguing that only A students have merit and ability. No. In fact, it is well known that the most productive students in the world are C students, not A. A students can go to academia and research, and maybe a few of them can become surgeons like Abdi. But the majority of producers, the ones who produce wealth, are C students. The wealthiest students in the world, the ones who become entrepreneurs, the ones who become innovators, the ones who become investors, did not get A's, did not even finish school. I mean, Bill Gates has been given as the poster boy for rich people who did not finish school. He didn't. Jobs did not finish school, the one who started Apple, right? This man who runs Virgin did not finish school. Most of these inventors have creativity in their head. You don't need a degree to be creative. You don't need a degree to be an innovator. And I'm not saying you should not graduate. Because the most of these people I'm giving as examples are a handful. The majority must graduate so that they work, so that you become like the millions and billions of people around the world. But in terms of real, tangible result, transforming your degree into wealth, there is no correlationship. A does not give you wealth. A does not necessarily give you good employment. But it gives you a foothold. It may give you a scholarship. It may give you a higher degree, which gives you a higher prospect of employment. The rest is just how you are able to understand the world. And the ones who understand the world are the ones who experience it, who know how to interpret it, who know how to engage with it, who know how to transform it. And that is outside the degree. So be innovative. Be creative. Look at your environment and see where you fit and how you can transform it. And you can transform any condition. If I didn't know what I was talking about, I wouldn't be here today. I looked at the environment in 2021, 2022, and I'm already locked outside the country. I analyzed these people. I looked at Ruto, I looked at Raila, I looked at Uhuru. I said, no. The only way I go back to Kenya, I defeat Uhuru and Raila together. Then I will be back in the country. And we did. If I had not taken an active part in the political process, I believe they would have won. And I would have been locked out of Kenya for good. I would have died abroad without coming back to my country. So no matter how little you are, no matter the modest abilities you have, it all adds up. If I am working with him, it is just the two of us. We may not get results. But if all of us were doing the same thing, moving in the same direction, if that door was locked, we can break it through. Julius Nyerere once said, the former president of Tanzania, the late, that the colonial governments came and colonized us and built a big jail, our current countries, and built doors and windows and locked them. So our only choice is to break it through, to kick it open. And that's what they did. Kick open the doors. If you find that the doors are closed and you are now a slave within a plantation, and the plantation is not democratic, kick open the doors.
Thank you. A better applaud for Dr. Miguna. Miguna, please. Thank you very much. Asante sana, General Dr. Miguna. I know Miguna, when he stands on the podium, he likes speaking, but he owns himself. Anajishika. So he didn't want to bring out everything. I know he has been reserving a lot, which was very good for us. Those who are streaming live, kindly you can text your questions and somebody will be forwarding them. Those who are streaming live on YouTube, you can make a comment on our page. Now we get to another session, a very important session which will be very brief. And this one is questions and answers, whereby it will be an interactive session. I know there are some things that you expected Dr. Miguna to address. Maybe you'd want to know from him, but he will be very brief in responding because of time. So I'll be giving around 4 or 5 slots for the staff members and around 5 to 7 slots for the students. And I will appreciate if we can all ask the questions, then Dr. Miguna will be compiling and will be coming back on the stage to address each of them. Kindly, I would want to start with the staff. And I would want you to come over. You can't ask from the chair. Or I can come there. Dr. Mushiri has something.
Thank you very much, General, and thank you very much for the very good conversation. I am asking myself in my mind, at what stage do you decide it is time to break the windows and the doors? So that you are now set to go out. When do you read, as you alluded, there is a bit of the question on when do you decide that it is too much for me and I now need to break off? You have held your back until a point when you decide now is the time. So when does that become the right time? Going to the street?
Thank you, Dr. Mushiri. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yes, the next one. Staff members are here. That's why I'm here. Papi. Hey. Okay. Still, Dr. Mutunga, you have something.
Like you heard from the VC, it was my student Linda when I was joining University of Nairobi, first year in.
AJ ni Wero TV.